Peter Clarke is going to explore if solar is correct for you, and also what does an excellent solar solution look like. And just before I hand over to Peter, I want to remind people again that the chat function is open and is available for anybody who's got any questions, and please feel free to put any questions you have to type them into the box. Thank you. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. Just double checking you can hear me all right there. Thumbs up. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chairman, and good evening, everyone. And incredible attendance here. Just looking at the ticker going up as David was speaking there, and we're over 200 on the call tonight. So really delighted with that, and it shows just how strong an interest I suppose there is amongst the farming community around renewables, and in particular rooftop solar. Very interesting, I suppose, what David was talking about there, and obviously in the context of where energy prices are and where they're probably going to be for a while. There's no doubt that we all want to look at ways that we can reduce our cost base. So in that context, there's been a huge amount of discussion in the media and from government around carbon reduction, and indeed supports that are out there now for renewable energy and if you like, things like rooftop solar installations. So what I want to do tonight is just to kind of have a wee think about that from the farming perspective, and to determine like what's the kind of questions that we as farmers should be asking ourselves right from the start of this process, because this is a significant capital investment, regardless of TAMS, which is very good, and we'll touch on it later. It's a significant capital investment, and in that context, we have to be very sure about what we're going to do. And you know, there is, in my view anyway, just a few key questions we can start to ask ourselves, and it'll determine whether this is right for us. And the reality is it's right for most of us, but maybe not all of us. So in that whole framework, we spent the last probably 18 months out there speaking to farmers from an IFA perspective, finding out what farmers wanted. We put a lot of that time into that, and a lot of the results of that was into lobbying into government to make some of the changes that we felt were needed for this. But we talked to farmers in the north and the south. We talked from east to west, large farmers, small farmers, all sectors. And the reality is that when we looked in the context of that large farming community and the choices of technology that were out there, the single technology that lent itself mostly to most farmers was rooftop solar. And I suppose on that basis, then we've pushed ahead with this project. And we'll talk about the actual offering that we have later on. But for the moment, I just want to step back a wee bit and say, as farmers, what should I be asking myself? And the reality is that the first biggest thing that we need to look at as farmers is, what is my current energy spend? If it's a large spend, absolutely, go to the next to the next phase on this, because the reality is that, farming costs are rising. If my spend is high, solar is probably something I should be looking at, renewable power for sure. In that context, though, I have to be clear that, own use is key in this whole procedure. As much of this energy as you can generate on site, green energy, that's almost free to generate. But the key is using that energy on the farm. There's no better input to the business case for solar than replacing a unit of retail electricity with a unit of green energy. And once you do that and use as much of this on the farm as you can, and I'm talking about you want to get up to a point where you're using 70 to 80% of what you're generating on the farm. Once you get up there, this starts to make sense in an awful lot of ways. So have I got a high spend? If I have, this is probably something I should be looking at. There are other changes coming along here now. So even if my spend isn't as high as some farmers, some different types of sectors, there have been changes in TAMS which brings, if you like, the playing field home to much more farmers than previously. Some of those changes are things like you can now include the farmhouse for a TAMS application. And again, we'll touch on this later, but assuming, if the house is attached to the farmyard onto the same meter, and it doesn't have to be, but if it is, it makes sense. Well, then that overall power that I'm using can be used for a TAMS application. Now, one kind of, if you like, there's a lot of disinformation out there. And one of the things I'd like to just debunk on the call now before is this idea that, there's a pot of gold out there in terms of solar for farmers. The reality is that's not the case at the moment. That may change in the future, but the reality is the way TAMS is structured, you cannot size a system that would generate more power than you used last year. That's the simple case if you want to use TAMS. If you spill over a little bit, that's fine. You will get a tariff. But the reality is, in the context of a business case for solar that probably runs into tens of thousands in most cases, what you would get for spillover export energy is minute and has really almost negative, zero impact on the business case. So what's my current use? Can I use as much of this energy on the farm? That's the key things you need to be asking yourself there. Is the house and the farm on the same meter? Again, doesn't have to be if it's in the vicinity of the farm, and Aidan will touch on that later. But if it's on the same meter, I can combine them together. And once I put the panels on a farm shed, well, then I'm in business. Now, what that does in reality is increases the amount of farmers that come into this net and make a genuine business case here. And by a genuine business case, I mean, a payback here that probably 2 years ago went from an average of 8 years, down to somewhere like in the region of, with TAMS, as low as, 2.5 years. So it's a really, really good business case that's out there at the moment for farmers. So now I have a high spend, the house is there. What kind of sheds do I have? Quite simply, the shed needs to be obviously in good condition. You need to have a roof that has a pitch that's probably in the region of 30-degree pitch, a normal typical farm shed roof. A curved roof like you'd see in a hay shed doesn't work. TAMS won't grant aid that. But look at your shed. It's a decent shed. It's in good shape. It's got a good roof on it, and it's got a good pitch on it. Well, then I'm probably in business. What direction is that shed facing? Obviously, in terms of the direction of that shed, north-south is probably optimal. Doesn't have to be exactly north to south. Some orientation east-west, is fine. The reality here is everything will work, but the difference is that optimally it's north-south. You'll get less performance of a little bit east-west, and some other things to consider here is things like, if I'm in the north of the country versus the southeast east of the country, believe it or not, some of the power generated by the panels, it can be up to 40% more productive in the southeast as the northwest. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that the production you're going to get, your business case is going to be slightly different. And that's why you really need to be speaking to someone who is looking at your farm as an individual farm and developing a business case for you. So now I have the sheds, I have a decent spend, the house is there. What do I need to ask myself next? Well, if you can find out what's the MIC of the farm, and I'll come back to single phase now, but at the top of the pyramid in terms of what you're allowed to install on your farm is the maximum import capacity that your farm can take from the grid. If that's 16 kilovolts, you cannot build a solar installation. ESB won't let you connect it. That's got inverters any higher than 16 kilovolts. So that's the kind of, at the top of the pyramid, that's going to determine the maximum size installation you can get. Because again, there's lots of disinformation out there advising farmers incorrectly that they can put this on, that on, as big as you want, export as much as you want. That's all fine until ESB come along or until TAMS come along and inspect, and you find that you have a real issue on your hand. So you've got to be able to make sure that you're with someone that develops this specifically for your farm. So I know my import capacity, if you can't find it in some retailer, electricity retailers, is on the top right hand side of the bill, but all you have to do is call ESB networks with your MPRN number, your meter number, and they'll tell you what the MIC is for the farm. After that, is my farm on single phase or three phase? If we don't know that, our electrician can tell us. You can tell from the fuse board as well. But again, these are important in the context of the microgeneration support scheme. If you're in single phase, your installation, regardless of your MIC, your installation will not be higher than 17 kilowatts. Three phase, you can go up to 50 kilowatts. These are important, again, for larger farmers that, to ensure that the installation is as per the ESB networks guidelines. So very, very important from that perspective. Will I apply for TAMS? you know, TAMS is very, very attractive now at 60% for the installation, and indeed now 60% for battery support for that installation. And the cap has been lifted. I'm not going to steal Aidan's thunder, he'll go through it, but it is very, very attractive now. So immediately I'd be saying, do you have a farm advisor to advise you on TAMS? If you have, as soon as you start thinking about this, start talking to your TAMS advisor to get the process started. First thing you do is talk to a trusted advisor. Second thing is talk to your TAMS advisor and get the process started to see what you need and get in the process. Do I need finance? You know, these are significant investments. The way TAMS works, you have to pay for this up front and claim your TAMS back. That needs money. Do you need finance? If you do, start talking to, you know, whatever source of finance you have. And again, you know, if you want to, if you have specific questions on finance, we can advise you on some of that as well. But again, it's something that you need to be thinking up front. And then and I referred this a couple of times in the presentation, where am I getting my advice? Who's helping me answer these questions? To me, this is the single most important thing that farmers need to think about. You know, there's lots of disingenuous people out there that will tell you can do the devil and all, you'll make a fortune, put this on your roof, put that on your roof. You know, you go ahead and do something, and then something doesn't work out, or it's not generating the revenues you thought it might be. And you go to call someone and they say, well, no, we're out of business anymore, or you can't get them, or whatever it is. You need to be talking to someone you can trust on this. Now, I'm not going to start selling this, but IFA Bord Gáis Solar, you know, we are from the farming community. We represent the farming community. We're the people you can trust. So, you know, if you do nothing else, get some decent advice and then help that make